Welcome to this week's Ronin seminar. We've got Thessen going to talk to us today. Take it away, Anne.
Thanks, John. So I actually have some news. After working as a consultant for the past 5 years, I have been offered a position at Oregon State University. So I've decided to take that position. Of course, I will still be part of the Ronin Institute, but I will be working on semantic web technology. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about what that is and what I'll kind of be doing over the past couple of years. Well, I've been doing it over the past couple of years, but I will be doing it for the next several years. I've actually been very interested in semantic web technology ever since I first encountered it back in 2008. So I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to work on it full time. And the title of my presentation is Challenges Integrating Environment and Phenotype. Now, this was a presentation that I first gave several years ago to a group of people who are involved in the bio-ontology community. And I'll talk a little bit about ontologies in a second. And fortunately, I will now be able to get back into this space full time. And so let me explain what ontologies are, and then we'll get into the challenges. So first of all, why do we even want to integrate environments and phenotypes? So one of the very important basic tenets of biology is that environments and genotypes will give you your phenotypes. And we've done a pretty good job of linking genotypes or genes to various functions and processes, but we really haven't been able to link with linking environments and things. So this graphic here that you're seeing right now is a graphic that came from a paper that I wrote back in 2015, where we went to this meeting with all of these bio-ontology people, and we came up with a series of use cases from these very different domains that are here in the bulleted list. And so these are the kinds of things that we would like to be able to do, or we would like to be able to study if we could link environments and phenotypes. But there are several challenges that prevent us from doing this right now. And one of the big challenges, I guess I will say, is that sure, you could go through and do this manually, right? You could sit around with a lot of papers, a lot of maps, a lot of data, and sort of pick out, okay, these are the phenotypes for these animals, and these are where these animals are found. So we'll link these two things together manually. But that's a lot of work. It'd take a lot of time, and you could definitely never scale it up. So here's an example of a potential workflow, right? So we've got the 3 data sets that you see across the top, right? Data set, we've got descriptions of taxa. We know what kind of phenotypes these different taxa have. We've got location occurrence data, so we know where these taxa are located. And then we know where different environments are on the planet, right? You could take little crosswalks across these 3 data sets to ultimately link phenotypes and environments. That's kind of where we want to get to, but we want to be able to do this in a way that scales. So here's where ontologies come in. Now, a lot of people are very intimidated or confused by what an ontology is, but I like to just sort of describe it as a dictionary for a computer. Only you don't just have terms and their definitions, you also have these logical bridges relating terms to each other, right? So here's an example of an ontology that describes coffee. And so this would all be in a machine-readable format so that a computer could know that coffee is a drink, right? So the things that are in those blue circles are called classes. They're the things in your ontology. So coffee is a class, cup is a class, sugar, cafe, drink. Different activities can be classes too, like making coffee and pouring coffee. And then the lines, the arrows that link the different classes together are called properties. So is a very common property. So this is where we see toward the bottom, coffee, which is outlined in red. You see a property there, is a drink. So this is how a computer understands that coffee is a drink. And if you're interested in biology-specific ontologies, have a look at the OboFoundry, obofoundry.org, I think it is. So you can see a lot of different ontologies there, but we'll look at some within the context of this presentation too. So why is this important? Well, how does this help? So we just built this knowledge structure, right? We've modeled our knowledge as in logic that a computer can actually reason over. So this helps because the computer can do some inferencing for us. And here's a very simple example that I've pulled from the gene ontology, which you can see in the OboFoundry. And so they have a property called regulates. Okay, so you could say that a gene regulates some molecular function or some process, right? So if you have a situation in your ontology where you said A is a B and B regulates C, then because of the logical properties of these properties, you can infer, or the software can infer that A regulates C without having to tell the computer. Now, as these ontologies and relationships get more complicated, these inferencing, the inferencing power gets stronger. But you can imagine that if you have these 3 data sets in this machine readable format, all you have to do is run your reasoner to do the inferencing, and then at the end of the day, you have your phenotypes linked to environments, right? So that's kind of the point. So why don't we, okay, so I'll show you some more examples and then I'll talk about why we don't already have this done. This is a screenshot from something called Ontobee, ONTOBEE, and it is a way for people to browse and search the ontologies that are in the OboFoundry. So this is an ontology called the environment ontology. So the classes are different environments. And here you can see we're looking at the class mangrove swamp. It's got a unique identifier that you can see at the top, the term IRI, and it has a human readable definition. And you can see in the class hierarchy section, you see that a mangrove swamp is a subclass of a coastal wetland, which is a subclass of a wetland all the way up to thing, right? And thing comes from something called the basic formal ontology, which is a very high-level ontology that separates things from qualities from processes, and you really don't have to kind of fool with that. You build off of that ontology. It's the foundation. So this is just a close-up of what I've just shown you, mangrove swamp, and there it is. And so this is important because if you're going to talk about some data that you collected in a mangrove swamp, or you want to say that a species was observed in a mangrove swamp, instead of saying swamp or mangrove swamp or freshwater swamp or whatever you want to say, you can use the URI or this unique identifier here at the top of the page. That way everybody knows what you're talking about. And if you were to put this into a browser window, it would take you here. So it is a resolvable identifier for a mangrove swamp. And then you would also be able to take advantage of the logical infrastructure inherent in this ontology. So why haven't we sort of pushed the button, done the reasoning, and built this data set already? Well, there are several challenges that have to do with the state of the data sets and the state of the ontologies right now. So there are 2 types of challenges right now. There are challenges of coverage and challenges of interoperability. So the coverage problems are issues of granularity, and I'll talk about each of these in turn, right? Problems with granularity, problems with terms and definitions, and there are lots of incomplete ontologies out there. The interoperability challenges fall under data integration, knowledge representation, and ontology alignment. Okay, so let's sort of dig into all of these a little bit deeper. So under challenges of coverage, we have the granularity issue, and we see a lot of this in our environmental data, as you can see in the graphic on the side. There are lots of different ways to say where you are. So you can basically say, give a political definition of where you are. I'm in the United States of America. I'm in Waltham, Massachusetts, and I can give that information at any level on this little triangle hierarchy, and different providers, different data sets will be at those different levels. I could also give my latitude and longitude, which I don't know right off the top of my head. And I can give that to you with different amounts of precision. I can also say that I am in a northeast suburban environment, right? I'm in the WWF whatever ecoregion. So so you can describe where you are politically, you can describe where you are using some sort of a coordinate system, and you can describe where you are based on the type of environment that you are in, right? Temperate forest, whatever. And all of those categories has a different degrees of granularity. So you can be as specific or as broad as you want to be in these three different categories. So that's a major problem. And that's just for the environmental data. The species observations can also be highly granular. So you can say that I found an insect so I found this beetle in a temperate hardwood forest, or I found this beetle underneath the bark of an oak tree. So your observations can be the same, right? You're reporting the same thing, but you're reporting it with very different granularity. And actually finding that insect under the bark, that's a very important piece of information, because the environment under the bark is going to be very different from on top of the bark. So that could be very important. Another challenge is terms and definitions, right? So everybody calls things by different terms. That's just the nature of language. So we've got the synonym problem, forests and woodlands, and then we've also got homonym problems, where people are using the same term to describe two totally different things. And so that's, of course, an issue. And when you're developing these ontologies with your terms and your classes, you can imagine that it would be this very difficult and, pulling your hair out trying to get everyone to agree on the definition of a scrubland. That can be very, very difficult. And then we've got the problem of incomplete ontologies. So not all domains have ontologies. You will not always be able to find the term that you need in the ontology. So there is an environment ontology, sure, but not every environment is represented in that ontology right now. Fortunately, many of these ontologies are very community driven, and they have ways for you to request new classes in these ontologies. If you have a problem, you can report issues. Most of these ontologies are on GitHub, and so they take advantage of the built-in issue tracker there. But again, that takes time, and a lot of people just see that they can't find what they want, and then they leave, and that's a problem. So this challenge of coverage, I just want to add that there is the world is globally, the world is undersampled. And so any kind of inferencing that you do on imperfect data is going to give you imperfect results. And you just have to be aware of the fact that any kind of results that you get are going to be very skewed toward places where the data are from. Okay, so now we're into the challenges of interoperability. And so we've got data integration challenges, and some of these I've mentioned before because they're also like coverage challenges too. So not only do we have the ability to report data to different levels of granularity, we can have people reporting the same, in this case, geolocation in different ways, right? And I've already said we've got political, we've got the coordinates, and then we've got the more environment-focused way of saying where you are. And so this map here is just one of the many ways that North America has been divided up into different environments. And none of these maps, so this was done by the North American Bird Conservation Initiative. So this is the map that they use, the categories that they use. It's not really connected to WWF ecoregions. It's not, I mean, none of these different maps are really connected to each other. And then we've got the temporal concerns, right? Daily and seasonal cycles, which can actually be extremely important. So for example, if you are saying, so the temperature where I collected my specimen is X degrees, if you're not also reporting a time of day, then that's a problem. And you can see here in this graph where we've got the temperature cycles at 3 places at the same observatory, at 3 depths at the same observatory over the course of the day, you're not really representing the environment. If you just give a temperature and you don't give a time of day, you're not really representing the environment that you found whatever specimen you found in, right? So that's something you have to think about. All right, so another challenge of interoperability is the actual way that we represent knowledge. So I spoke before about ontologies and how it's classes and linked together with properties. There are actually lots of different ways to link together classes with properties, and nobody really knows the best way to do it because this is quite new. All you can really do is kind of sit down and think about it and think about what kind of queries you want to do and try to put something together that makes some logical sense. And so this shows 2 pieces of data the same piece of data represented in using 2 different ontologies. So the one at the top, A, is an observation of a species represented using something called OBOI, which is like, observation environment ontology. I don't know. People come up with these acronyms. I'm not sure where they come from half the time, but that's one way to do it. B is something called the biological collections ontology that describes, collecting a taxon or observing a tadpole at a place at a time, and the temperature was a certain temperature. So there are multiple ways to do it. You could see the one on the bottom is a newer method that's much more granular, includes a lot more information. So this one is the one that people are kind of running with right now. But in the beginning, when you're first starting to develop these ontologies, you don't really know what you're doing. So you're just sort of doing the best that you can and seeing what works, and then new things are discovered and you've got to kind of change course and figure out how that's going to work out. And that kind of takes me into the next topic, which is ontology alignment. So like I said, when people are first started to do this, the first gene ontology paper was published in 2000. So people have been doing this for a while and they didn't really know. You don't know the best way to do it right off the top of your head, right? You've got to do some experiments, you've got to try it out, and then other people are working on other things, and then there's overlap, and so what do you do? And a lot of these ontologies aren't necessarily designed to align to each other. So you can see in the diagram, you've got Eagle Eye, Vivo, and Phof are 3 different ontologies that describe relationships between people and various other things. And so, a Phof agent class overlaps with the Vivo agent class, but that's about it. And then the Eagle Eye organization and role class overlaps with the Vivo organization and role class, but that's about it. So if you've got these different implementations of your data set, say I set up my data set in Vivo, I'm limited in what kind of crosswalks I can make. Or if I have a data set and I'm trying to make a decision about what ontology to use to model it, I have to try to think about, well, which one of these ontologies integrates the best with all this other stuff, and which one do I think has an active user community and will stick around for a while. So, and it's really hard to know which one to pick sometimes. Going back to this paper, so we did, like I said at the beginning, that graphic came from a paper that I published on different use cases. And so these are some examples of those use cases. So this is the kind of thing that we would like to do if we had these capabilities. And on a small scale, maybe we can do it manually just to kind of see where it takes us and justify investing more time in chasing this up. So we did 2 very small proof of concept examples. The first one was fish miniaturization. Can we find a difference in the habitats between mini and non-mini fish that could lead to some sort of a causal relationship? So is there something in the environment that's leading to fish miniaturization, or that's driving the evolution of mini fishes? So fish miniaturization is not just small fish, because oftentimes these mini fishes will have lost entire bones. At least that's what I'm told. I'm not a fish person. Okay, so the other proof of concept is amphibian breeding habitats. What types of amphibians might be affected by the removal of a sole freshwater resource? So can we link habitat to different breeding phenotypes? Some of the fish people took this proof of concept on. The challenges of working with that proof of concept is that phenotype variability can vary within the species. So you can't just take an observation of a taxon and tack on all of these phenotypes, because not every taxon will exhibit the same phenotype, right? Lifestyle can be very important. And again, scale is important. Are we talking about the entire global population of the species? Or are we talking about little subpopulations? Okay, so lifestyle is important, right? And also the scale. So not just the scale of the population, but the scale of the environment. So as I said before, if you find that insect under the bark, it's experiencing that environment very differently. In the same way that a bird experiences a forest very differently from a ciliate, even though you would be annotating those 2 organisms with temperate hardwood forest, you're not really describing the environments that they're experiencing. We identified 3 ways. So I'm coming up on the end here. We've got to figure out how to address these challenges if we're ever going to be able to use this infrastructure to actually solve any problems or answer any questions. And so there are 3 ways to address these challenges. And these strategies were developed within this biontology group. And first of all, it has to be easy to contribute to existing ontologies. And for some ontologies, it already is pretty easy. For some, it's not. I suppose having to use GitHub to report an issue can be viewed as difficult. You at least have to know how to do that. We need to think about georeferencing environments with temporal considerations. So not only are we working with like times of day and things of that nature, but let's say I'm at a place in 2000 and it's a meadow, but then I go back tomorrow and it's now a parking lot. I do need to be able to put a timestamp on my observation of that environment, because environments change over time. And we do need to do a bit of community organizing, especially research communities that share common resources. And I know that that's a loaded statement. I know that is a very difficult thing to do. And the ontologies that are in the Obo Foundry right now represent years and years of dedicated time and funding to develop these community resources, to actually get people physically in the same room to come up with definitions and classes and agree. And again, this all came from a PeerJ paper that's open access. You can find it. It's very easy. And so in summary, the link between phenotypes and environments is fundamental to biology. Ontologies can help us make this link, but significant challenges remain. And I think we should address those challenges so that we can take advantage of these tools. All right, so with that, I can take questions.